federal judge has ordered the release of the identities of dozens of people mentioned in the court documents related to convicted pedophile.
For anyone who doesn't know, we're watching the Aubrey video on Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
The papers could reveal more than 150 people who were associated with Epstein.
Epstein was an operator. Even if you take the absolute minimalist view of what Epstein could have been up to, I mean, he was a crook through and through.
How many other people has this happened to? How many other stories are sitting in a vault, in an ABC News or an NBC News vault, of powerful people that they wanted to preserve their relationship with?
On the morning of December 5th, 2010, Woody Allen was photographed here with his wife and stepdaughter, leaving the Upper East Side mansion of New York financier and at that point recently convicted pedophile Jeffrey Edward Epstein. Over a decade ago, I doubt the average American had even heard the name Jeffrey Epstein. Yet, the 57-year-old had just gotten off house arrest for soliciting a minor for prostitution and registered as a sex offender only 3 months prior to the big celebration he was throwing for the Duke of York, and then fourth in line to the throne, Prince Andrew, as journalist Alexandra Wolf reported all the way back in 2011. While several of his guests that day, which included the ABC anchor George Stephanopoulos, CBS personalities Katie Couric and Charlie Rose, and comedian Chelsea Handler, have all expressed regret for not doing more research into their host, except for Charlie Rose, who was actually pretty close to Epstein and would even meet girls through him. All of these people were convening that day in a $77 million mansion that would later be dubbed a House of Depravity by Epstein's victims. Physicist Lawrence Krauss, despite knowing exactly why Epstein had spent time in jail, told the Daily Beast in 2011, "I do not feel tarnished in any way by my relationship with Jeffrey. I feel raised by it." Everyone and their dog is now aware that Jeffrey Epstein had connections in the highest of high places, but the specific nature of those connections has always largely been shrouded in mystery, and that may be by design. These connections include, but of course are not limited to, well-respected scientists, scholars, actors, lawyers, real estate moguls, US presidents, and international leaders from all around the globe. While Prince Andrew's now infamous camaraderie with Epstein made quite the splash in British media 10 years ago,
Prince Andrew's ex-wife was given £15,000 by his American friend Jeffrey Epstein to pay off some of her debts. That friend, a convicted sex offender.
The American press stayed unusually quiet back then. This Daily Beast article was one exception, but even Wolf herself asks in it why nobody, particularly New York socialites, seemed to know or even care about what Epstein had just admitted to doing in Palm Beach. Remember, this dinner party happened 3 years after Epstein very publicly pled guilty to procuring a minor for sex, and 8 years before he would be arrested again on federal charges of human trafficking, then die under mysterious circumstances that remain the subject of intense debate today, even becoming somewhat of a running joke.
Thank you so much, James.
Yep. And remember, Epstein didn't kill himself.
Okay, got it. Very clever.
And now, with a judge recently ordering thousands of past court documents to be unsealed, Epstein and friends are back under the spotlight of public scrutiny once again, with all the pop-based, pop-crave, poo-crave Twitter accounts teasing the news like it was a new Travis Scott album or something. For a while, you could even place bets on which celebrities might be exposed as an Epstein client.
Did you see Bet Online is letting people bet money on who will be on the Epstein list? I'm doing that right now. Wait, what? An official betting pool for it? Harvey Weinstein, easy slam dunk. Hillary, probably. Joe Biden, I think he's probably too old. Like, I don't even think he knows what planes are right now.
Which is a long way of saying that despite the man himself being long gone, the Epstein saga is anything but over. This story has fascinated and frustrated me for as long as I've been paying attention to it. And the more you dig in, the more questions seem to crop up. It's a complex tale, often mired in conspiracy and littered with political interests.
Bill Clinton. Nice guy, Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
My brother in Christ, you were on the plane. This video not only attempts to...
Why would you even say that out loud when you are literally on that list? Why? Why?
outline the years-long behavior Epstein and company were said to participate in. It's also about shedding light on what we still don't know, and what we may very well never know. We won't get to everything today, since this is only one part of what will eventually be a 3-part series, but I hope it can at least be a starting point for those not as privy to the timeline of the late trafficker's reign of terror, and those who maintained correspondence with the man even after his guilt became abundantly clear. Everyone now knows the name Jeffrey Epstein, but the question I intend on answering is how it all came to this.
Tonight, more newly unsealed court documents just released involving accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein.
Tonight, the blast radius from Jeffrey Epstein's reach continues to grow.
The accuser in the case did claim that she met the former president on Epstein's private island.
Jeffrey Epstein's mansion was a hive of activity today amid uproar over his suicide behind bars.
Jeffrey Epstein's victims recounted in sworn depositions about the many powerful and famous men they met in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit.
I don't know what to make out of these documents. I don't know how these lists were compiled, and I have nothing to do with that. You know, that's not my business. What I'm concerned about is my brother's murder.
I'm talking about Jeff Epstein, the New York financier.
Yes! We're talking about the same Jeff Epstein.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I never heard.
Oh, it was a big story in the news. Huge.
Jeff Epstein.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure, with respect, if there was some news about Jeff Epstein, I would have heard.
I saw lots of people doing lots of hard work, and hard work didn't translate into success either. It wasn't what you knew or how hard you worked.
It was just a bit. Okay. I'm gonna believe you guys because I don't want to live in the reality that it wasn't a bit. So, I understand that the U.S. doesn't necessarily have any jurisdiction over people who aren't currently in the U.S. or like non-citizens or whatever. Maybe a little bit of jurisdiction. But why the fuck haven't we arrested all of the sick bastards who went to the island to solicit sex? Sorry, it's a rhetorical question. It's a rhetorical question. Just like... I'm sorry. I can't even believe it. Like, I just can't even believe it. It's genuinely surprising to me that we have literal proof that these people went to this island specifically to solicit sex. And they're not in prison.
What I love is the don't lots of it, in fact, turns out to be not necessarily who you knew, but who you came in contact with.
One of the most robust biographies of Jeffrey Epstein we have was written by his own legal defense team following his initial indictment in Palm Beach, handed over to state prosecutors in 2007 by one of Epstein's lawyers, who also made sure to attach a smug, handwritten note that read, "Enjoy some fun reading on your defendant." Obtained in 2019 by the Palm Beach Post, the generous wording of this thing should be entirely expected. I mean, it was written by his defense team after all. It glowingly recounts recounts all the times Epstein lent a helping hand to the people around him, and includes testimonies of former girlfriends Eva Anderson and Ghislaine Maxwell. Being sure to mention that the reason Epstein has shied away from becoming a parent is because the demands of his business would not allow him the kind of time and presence needed to be a good parent. I'm sure that's what it is. To back up a little here, it also notes that Epstein was born in Coney Island, Brooklyn, New York in January 1953. Jeffrey and his younger brother Mark were raised in a middle-class environment by their two parents, Pauline, a school aide, and Seymour, a groundskeeper for the city of New York. It's always mentioned that he liked to play the piano and that he did so well academically that he was able to graduate Lafayette High School 2 years early when he was just 16, before going on to study math and physics at the Cooper Union for a few years. Epstein never graduated, but he did transfer to NYU, where he would also not graduate. So the natural question becomes, how did a two-time college dropout get a job at teaching math at the prestigious Dalton School the same year he left NYU behind? After all, the Dalton schools produced a number of notable alumni, including Chevy Chase, Anderson Cooper, Sean Ono Lennon, and specifically while Epstein was there, Prudence Murdoch, daughter of Fox News founder Rupert Murdoch, and actress Jennifer Grey, according to
Surely not through nepotism, yes?
PR. The New York Times reports that the school's headmaster at the time Epstein was hired was Donald Barr, who, fun fact, is the father of William Barr, the U.S. Attorney General under Trump, who you may know for being in charge of the DOJ when Epstein died in custody decades later, which is just one of the many strange tidbits we'll see throughout this story, like the fact that Donald Barr once wrote a book called Space Relations, about a planet ruled by oligarchs who engage in child sex slavery. So I'm glad that's something I know, and now so do you. As former Dalton social studies teacher Susan Semel told The Times, Barr was explicitly looking to hire teachers with less conventional backgrounds in the field. And while Epstein was about as unconventional as it got, he was barely 21 years old, had no experience in the world of education. I mean, he's a two-time dropout and would show up to school wearing fur coats and gold chains that would dangle in front of his grossly exposed hairy chest. I'm sorry for the mental image, but I think it's worth illustrating here in detail. His tenure at Dalton, though, wouldn't last long, according to the interim headmaster, who alluded to Epstein's lack of effectiveness. If you ask his students what they thought about the eccentric instructor, the consensus seems to vary. Some described him as caring and attentive, while others recall a clear inappropriateness about the way he conducted himself. It's also been reported that he'd attend student parties where underage drinking would occur, to the point that it would become widely taught.
Sorry, but I just wanted to point out, I love the stock footage.
Student parties
that was used for underage drinking, like the kid doing the
underage drinking would occur, to the point that it would be
it was too good to not bring it.
Become widely talked about among the school. Epstein's bizarre behavior even made it all the way up to the headmaster that replaced Barr, Gardner Dunnan, whose attorney has since told The Times he denies being aware of any concerns of Epstein's conduct. It's also worth noting that Dunham himself was later accused of sexually assaulting a 14-year-old. Epstein may have been out at Dalton, but he sure wasn't down on his luck, struggling to find his next gig either. Ever since the beginning, one of his few talents may have been his ability to suck up to the gaggle of powerful people in his vicinity. Robert Couturier, an interior designer who knew Epstein during the 80s, told Vanity Fair in 2021 that Epstein was a flatterer, with a woman named Leon Koppel telling the Miami Herald to give Jeff credit. He knew how to woo people, how to schmooze, and she would know her father Ace Greenberg is the one who gave Epstein a job at Bear Stearns, a now failed investment bank on Wall Street. Greenberg, Bear Stearns chairman, who was reportedly introduced to Epstein through Dalton, was clearly fascinated in the young teacher and saw great potential for him in the economic world despite his lack of experience in, well, anything that wasn't sniffing the farts of the most powerful people in the room. Something I find odd is that Epstein miraculously kept finding himself in these highly desirable job positions when he was less than qualified to fulfill them. He was a lackluster candidate at best, yet he was still, for some reason, being paid by billionaires like Leon Black extraordinarily well, better than most money managers would have been getting paid, in fact, begging the question, what exactly made Epstein so uniquely appealing to these people? I mean, they could have hired in.
Is it safe to assume all wealthy white men are pedophiles at this point? I think it's safe to assume that a lot of them are. That there are a lot of wealthy white old dudes who have serious control fetishes and like to exert that control over, I don't know, children, teenagers. Unsignia, thank you for the 2 months. Thank you. I just like, I want to give these guys a nice firm handshake, if you know what I mean.
Anyone in the world to do a better job for a way lower rate. It doesn't make sense. But Black and Greenberg weren't the only fans of the underqualified 20-something. Even the future CEO of Bear.
Sorry to pause again, but I feel like everyone's going to fuck up in life and everyone is going to do selfish things in life and everyone's going to do mean things in life. I have, I'm sure probably everyone else in here has done something, you know, cold or mean. Or even just not being thoughtful about the way that you're acting. Just not thinking about how other people feel in some instance. I know I've done it. I just try to constantly keep myself in check and I want to be the best version of myself. And so every day I'm just trying to be every day I'm trying to be better than the last day. You're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. As long as you're constantly dedicated to being better. I can excuse a lot of shitty behavior from a lot of people. Because I feel like I can chalk up a lot of it to like a lack of emotional intelligence or a lack of just thoughtfulness or just making a mistake or sometimes just ignorance. I can chalk up a lot of stuff to things that are reasonable, that, you know, it's just impossible to be infallible as a human. To err is human. Sadly, I know. I wish I was perfect. I wish human beings could be perfect. I don't understand how anyone could get to the point where they are engaged in a teenage sex trafficking ring. Because there's being, you know, a bit of a fuck up. There's being a bit of an asshole. And then there is like being the most control hungry, power hungry freak you can be. Like how does a man become that? When I say man, I'm saying like human. How? Genuinely makes me question if some people are just born evil. How do you get that point? Is so alien to me. Because again, I'm a very understanding person. I'm a very understanding person. People fuck up. People do mean stuff sometimes. And that's okay because you're not going to be perfect and you need to accept that and you need to recognize and constantly learning, growing. I feel like the past decade, I've learned so much. The jump from that to pedophile is crazy to me. That's crazy to me.
Stearns, James Cain, was happy to take Epstein.
Sorry, wait. So quit branding all older white men with money as pedophiles. Hypocritical ? No, just tired of hypocrites and wokeism ran amok. I can't imagine why you would feel like I was persecuting old white men. I could not imagine. I wish I could know the reason. I wish if only there was a way to know the reason. If only. If only. Oh, if only. But I guess we'll never know. My brother in Christ. My brother in Christ. It's not my fault all the people that are on Epstein's fucking list are white old dudes. I didn't decide that. I don't have that kind of power. If that's your burden to bear as an old white dude, you have to recognize that there are people that belong to your group that suck. That's your cross to bear, man. It is. But guess what? If that doesn't apply to you, you shouldn't be getting offended. Unless you're a fucking snowflake, in which
Someone
case...
come get their papa. He's confusedly typing on a Twitch chat.
In which case... Are you streaming on Facebook? Otherwise, how do you even get in here? That's what I'm saying. Because I feel like... I don't know. I just personally feel like if I was a white dude, I would not get offended. I would be like grossed out by these dudes. I'd be like, I can't even believe I share the same species as this person. I can't believe I'm the same gender as this person. Jesus fuck. That's how I would feel. But what do I know? I'm not a white guy. I'm not a white guy. Maybe being offended is okay, actually. I don't know.
Under his wing during his time at the firm, as Time magazine reported that Epstein worked his way up from a lowly junior assistant to a floor trader before becoming a limited partner in 1980. The same year, Cosmopolitan crowned him Bachelor of the Month. With this little magazine snippet that claimed the 27-year-old talks only to people who make over $1 million a year. If you're a cute Texas girl, write this New York dynamo at 55 Water Street. All I can hope now is that no Texas girl actually did that. He left the next year to start his own thing, but continued trading with Bear Stearns until their collapse in 2008. Around the time Epstein was experiencing somewhat of a collapse of his own, but don't worry, he still have plenty of ways to move.
I think I qualify as an old white guy, and this shit disturbs me to my core. Thank you for bringing sanity back to my life. Thank you. Okay, wait, I have to say nobody is defending pedophiles of any age, but the ageism is getting old. I see what you did there. Very nice play on words there. Very nice play on words. Getting old like you. It's a very nice play on words. Excellent, excellent. Well done.
Move massive hordes of money around all the way up until his death. But let's just put all of that to the side for a second. First, talk about one of Epstein's more lucrative connections he made up until this point. A peculiar little character by the name of Les Wexner, whose real-time net worth hovers around a humble $6 billion, is the 86-year-old founder of a global retailing empire. Launching the clothing company The Limited all the way back in 1963, Wexner went on to make a series of business acquisitions that allowed his influence to expand exponentially over the following decades. He acquired Victoria's Secret in 1982, Abercrombie & Fitch in 1988, Bath & Body Works in 1990, and by 2003, Fortune magazine considered Limited Brands the most admired specialty retailer in the world. And at that point in time, Wexner's financial manager was none other than Jeffrey Epstein.
His ties to Columbus native Wexner have been brought into the national spotlight.
The genesis of Epstein and Wexner's decades-long close friendship is somewhat of a debate due in part to how murky Epstein's life became after leaving Bear Stearns, but also thanks to Epstein's conflicting answers as to which year the two buddies officially met. First bragging about the investment advice he gave to Wexner in 1986, only to seemingly backtrack and say he didn't begin advising him until 1989, actually. Regardless, Wexner didn't shy away from describing to Vanity Fair just how close the two were, calling Epstein very smart with a combination of excellent judgment and unusually high standards. Whatever that means. But then again, this was his, quote, most loyal friend, at least in 2003. And I know you may be wondering, hey, this was years before Jeffrey Epstein got publicly exposed as a serial sex trafficker, so is it really that fair to criticize the guy if he didn't know Epstein was bad until at least 2008? And I might agree with that, if Wexner hadn't been so personally involved with the man to the point where Epstein reportedly told a friend that Wexner knows everything about me. He knows every experience I've had. With Vanity Fair also noting that Wexner was warned hundreds of times by Robert Meister, who originally introduced the two men, to drop Epstein after learning about his sexual proclivities before 2008. But it wasn't just Meister sounding the alarm bells.
Oh, this guy fucking based. These are the people that like restore my faith. Every time I get sad, I'm just like, it's okay. People are good. Meister redeemed old white guys. Maybe old white guys aren't so bad. This is crazy, by the way, to say this. The breaking point came when Epstein showed up unannounced at Meister's Park Avenue apartment with 5 models for Meister's sexual entertainment. Epstein thought he was bringing me a gift. Meister recalled I told him, "Get the fuck out and I never want to see you again." Hashtag not all white guys. Hashtag not all old white guys. This is the most Chad thing you could ever do, by the way. This is it. This is like... Oh, you're the guy who a bunch of women are accusing of rape? And you're bringing me some women who I don't know, and I don't know how you got them, as a gift for me. Sorry, I'm not a fucking sexual deviant. I'm not a fucking freak. Honestly, those words are too nice. Those words are too nice. Because actually, there's lots of cool people that are sexual deviants that just like to have a little fun.
Proclivities before 2008. But it wasn't just Meister sounding the alarm bells. Harold Levin and Jerry Merritt, who both worked for Wexner, told Vanity Fair they too warned their boss of Epstein's shadiness. Yet despite it all, to this day, Wexner denies knowing anything about his former best friend's criminal behavior, telling employees he was never aware of the illegal activity and would never have guessed that a person I employed more than a decade ago could have caused such pain to so many people, even though he would have known exactly that. In fact, I find it basically impossible for Wexner to not know that his, quote, most loyal friend had been going around and lying to women about his relationship with Victoria's Secret by falsely labeling himself a modeling recruiter, according to one police report, which also included the claim that Epstein had groped model Alicia Arden in 1997. And that's not to mention when a year prior, an artist named Maria Farmer reached out to authorities claiming Epstein had assaulted her while working on Wexner's Ohio property. She filed a police report, but somehow Wexner never caught wind of any of that, I guess, and didn't cut ties until 18 months after charges were brought against Epstein in Palm Beach. In fact, Epstein not only remained Wexner's power of attorney for almost 2 decades, he also served as a trustee on the board of the Wexner Foundation, oversaw the construction of his super yacht, and even drafted a prenup for Wexner and his wife. And if that wasn't enough, Wexner would reportedly sell Epstein a Boeing 727 for $10 million in 2000, and also allow Epstein to take possession of his multi-million-dollar Upper East Side mansion for the low price of free, which is a long way of saying that there's a special place in the afterlife for Mr. Wexner.
Is this guy trying to suggest that Mr. Wexner
More like
was
less
as much
Wexner, please.
that
Am
this
I
guy
right?
was as much of a piece of shit as Epstein? Surely no. Surely. Clueless. Rational EMP, thank you for the 4 months. Yeah.
We're on the subject, one of the greatest mysteries surrounding Jeffrey Epstein to this day is where he acquired the massive fortune he used to bankroll his decades of international criminal activity. He's usually referred to in the news as a billionaire, but we really don't know how much money he exactly had at his peak. Prosecutors in 2019 estimated he had a net worth of at least $500 million, but the fact that we have no definitive explanation for where any of that really came from should infuriate everyone watching this. Now, Wexner is commonly speculated to at least be in part responsible for the digits in Epstein's bank account. After all, he did claim Epstein misappropriated vast sums of money from him and his family only after his, quote, most loyal friend's arrest, of course. But even if Epstein ripped off one of Wexner's charities for a quick and easy $46 million, that would barely account for the rest of his gargantuan wealth. So naturally, people are kind of forced to just guess. Some of the current acting theories have to do with blackmail, which we will explore in part 2, money laundering, and his possible connection to one of the largest Ponzi schemes in American history. See, there's a little gap in the resume we've discussed so far. After working for Bear Stearns and before becoming Les Wexner's appointed hatchet man, Epstein began his own consulting firm, working as a bounty hunter in his own words to help clients recover stolen money, which further brought him into contact with some very rich individuals, claiming he wouldn't do business with anyone not a billionaire, even brushing elbows with members of international governments, as Vanity Fair wrote in that 2003 article. Maybe this is why law enforcement discovered a mysterious passport after a raid on his home in 2019, which exhibited Epstein's image next to a fake name and a noted place of residence in Saudi Arabia. I promise we'll get to the Ponzi scheme thing in a second. Okay, we're almost there. His lawyers at the time said he needed this fake ID for protection as a Jewish person traveling regularly to the Middle East. Why was he going to the Middle East, you ask? Well, one of Epstein's clients at this time was identified by journalist Vicky Ward as Adnan Khashoggi, who, among other things, was a middleman in the Iran-Contra scandal who helped smuggle cash for the Marcos family out of the Philippines. During his travels overseas is where Epstein was reportedly introduced by alleged arms dealer Douglas Leese, known for his involvement in a multi-billion-dollar weapons deal between Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom, to American businessman and future convicted fraudster Stephen Hoffenberg. Hoffenberg, over the next several decades, would spend 18 years behind bars for his involvement in a $475 million financial scheme that he now says Epstein masterminded. Okay, see, I told you we'd get to the Ponzi scheme thing eventually. It just took a minute, but thanks for sticking by. Hoffenberg told NPR in 2019 that he considered Epstein to be brilliant, extraordinarily gifted and talented in convincing people to buy from him. And also, he was a criminal mastermind, by the way. The criminal enterprise that Hoffenberg is describing rather openly here went by the pretty uncreative name of Towers Financial. Hoffenberg and his self-described best friend, Epstein, who worked as a paid consultant through the 80s and 90s, ran a team of people on Wall Street, investment people that raised these $1 billion illegally, as Hoffenberg told CBS News, feeling the need to emphasize he was my guy, my wingman, which is personally not a term I would use to describe Jeffrey Epstein in any circumstance, but over the course of 5 years,
I feel like wingman requires some level of skill, not just, I don't know, coercion. But maybe that's just me.
prosecutors allege the company raised 9 figures, almost $500 million of investors' money by selling them fake bonds. They'd then use the money to repay earlier investors while pocketing the difference. A classic Ponzi that you may be shocked to hear lasted as long as it did, but keep in mind, this was a pre-Bernie Madoff era, so a financial fraud of this scale was almost unheard of in the early 90s. The strangest part of it all, however, is that despite multiple parties being so able to recall Epstein as a prominent component of the Ponzi scheme, Epstein himself was never charged alongside his buddy Stephen Hoffenberg, who pled guilty to 5 criminal charges in 1995. As Terrence Corrigan, a lawyer representing over 2,800 people defrauded by Towers, told CBS, as I understood, Epstein was sort of a senior VP. If he was not the number 2 guy, he was certainly the number 2 or number 3 person at the firm. I know we saw organization charts, and yes, Epstein's name was on them. With another attorney, one representing Towers Financial, reinforcing reinforcing Corrigan's memory. Epstein was a consultant at Towers Financial. I met him there and I drafted a consulting agreement as I was an attorney at the company. I remember him. Epstein was even mentioned in a lawsuit against the company filed by the Illinois Department of Insurance, who, now you're probably wondering, why was Illinois involved? Well, they claimed Towers had carried out an illegal transfer that violated Illinois law. As you can see here, Epstein's name appears in their documents multiple times, yet for whatever reason, Epstein never once appeared as a defendant in the 1993 federal case against Hoffenberg. Although Hoffenberg's testimony to the grand jury included mention of Epstein being the mastermind behind the whole thing, as reported by Julie K. Brown, Epstein was nonetheless dropped from the case for reasons that are still unknown today.
For reasons. Yeah, everybody knows usually it's just for reasons.
While Hoffenberg was awaiting a jail sentence, Epstein was busy frolicking around the White House and schmoozing power brokers at dinners and events like the White House Historical Association fundraiser in 1993, which included such beautiful guests as Clark Clifford, a man responsible for establishing BCCI in the United States. BCCI, which we definitely don't have enough time to dive into here, was an international bank used to transfer dark money between international governments later found to be involved in a litany of shady activity ranging from money laundering to illegal weapons sales to human trafficking. Clifford himself had charges brought against him that would be dropped not because prosecutors thought he was innocent all of a sudden, but because of Clifford's poor health the same year that he attended this fundraiser with Epstein. Frankly, the idea that a man accused of helping to facilitate one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history could avoid prosecution and immediately pal around with some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the country at an exclusive White House fundraiser is enough to turn anyone into a conspiracy theorist.
I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna say it. I'm very proud of myself for being able to not pause a billion times and actually get to enjoy this video. I just want to give a shout out to myself. All right. Just want to say, you're welcome, guys. You're welcome. You're welcome. Is this the real Denims? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Is this an AI stream? Okay. I only want to pause when I'm adding to the video, not if I'm taking away from it. And Aubrey just fucking slaps.
Other than that 2003 Vanity Fair puff piece and a glowing profile in New York Magazine that we will get to in a bit, Epstein had lived much of his life in the shadows since the early 80s, making it all the more tricky for investigators and journalists to track his elusive movements. A lot of the insight we now know is thanks to Miami Herald journalist Julie K. Brown, who presents an extremely comprehensive timeline of events in her excellent book Perversion of Justice, which I read in preparation for this video and would recommend to anyone looking to learn more about the Epstein story. Brown, who has covered the story extensively for years now, writes that the earliest instances of Epstein's sex crimes against minors date back to the mid-90s, when, at a Michigan summer camp in 1994, he and his then-girlfriend Ghislaine approached a 13-year-old child. According to the Daily Mail article Brown cites here, the anonymous girl's mother says she looked even younger than she was. Then, years later, when Ghislaine's trial was underway in 2021, one of the lawyers representing the now convicted trafficker wrote this young victim's story off as the result of her own conduct, and that the girl had voluntarily or negligently assumed a known risk, consenting to the abuse. A
Nina Bog, thank you for the prime. Hell is too good for these people.
13-year-old. That is what lawyers representing Epstein and Ghislaine have consistently thought of the hundreds of girls who were systematically trafficked throughout their
popular opinion. Usually people be like unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say popular opinion. Ghislaine is more evil than Epstein because she used her female privilege to coerce women into giving them like a false sense of safety. And she understood that dynamic and she abused that dynamic. To be clear, not much worse. They're both really fucking disgusting people, but you are sick to do this. You're fucking sick to do this.
Childhood. So just keep that in mind as we move forward here and discuss Epstein's track record of abuse across the United States. Some of it taking place in New York, some at his New Mexico baby farm, as he called it, and of course a lot of it occurring at the Palm Beach mansion he bought in 1990. To understand Epstein's years-long pattern of abuse, we have to establish the location of this 14,000 square foot monstrosity. Unfortunately, the neighborhood that housed Epstein's $44 million oceanfront property was only a short drive away from a much less privileged area of Palm Beach, Florida. Testimony from even more victims prove he explicitly sought out girls from broken families, girls who were either homeless or on the verge of homelessness, those who came from tragic backgrounds wrought by addiction, suicide, and abuse already, girls who lived in trailer homes and were in and out of foster homes, girls who Epstein knew would not be taken seriously by the legal system. A prediction that his infamous plea agreement years later would ultimately prove right. And just a fair warning, a lot of this video from here on out will be discussing what victims experienced at the hands of Epstein and his associates, so if that's something you're unable to listen to, I completely understand, and just wanted to make it very clear before we get into any of the details. Throughout the mid-90s to the early noughts, Epstein would employ several tactics to prey on girls who primarily attended Palm Beach Gardens High School, Lake Worth Middle School, and Royal Palm Beach High, which the Palm Beach Post named Ground Zero in Epstein's operation. One of those girls was Michelle Licata, who was just 16 years old when she was approached by a friend at school in the days leading up to Christmas, 2004. Michelle, who recalled to ABC working at a supermarket and being strapped for cash at the time, was looking to earn some money in order to buy her family gifts for the holidays. According to her friend, all Michelle needed to do was massage an old guy and she'd get $200. This made Michelle curious, and because she was led to believe the massage would take place in a professional environment similar to the spas she had seen in the past, she obliged. It was only on the drive there that Michelle realized they weren't going to a professional facility. They were going to a house. And after finally arriving outside a sprawling mansion in a neighborhood she had never seen before, her friend hastily remarked that the man who lived inside might ask her to undress during the massage. Before she knew it, Michelle was whisked inside and led upstairs by several other women she had never met to a cold, dark bathroom where she was forced to encounter Jeffrey Epstein, lying face down on the massage table, talking on the phone. In that moment, Michelle was lost, confused, and left all alone with a man old enough to be her father. She then goes on to recount how Epstein molested her, noting that his face was enough to terrify her for the rest of her life. After the incident was over, Epstein paid her $200 and asked her to deliver another $100 bill to the friend who had brought her there. She got back in the car and told her friend what had happened, to which the friend responded, "Oh, that's okay. He tried to do that with my other friend too," as Michelle told Brown. Interestingly though, as Michelle told ABC, there were in fact other adults present at the estate. Gardeners, butlers, housekeepers, etc. It's just that they did nothing, as if they were used to seeing such girls come and go all the time. And as everyone knows now, that was the case. He did this frequently.
When Palm Beach police began interviewing teenagers in 2005, they were astonished at what dozens told them about Jeffrey Epstein.
Every girl that meets Jeffrey starts off with giving him a massage. The more you do with him, the more you make. Basically, if you take off your clothes, you're gonna make more. If you let him do things to you, you're gonna make more. I did it naked, but I wouldn't let him touch me or anything like that. So after that, he's like, you know what? He's like, listen, I'll pay you $200 for every girl that you bring to me.
She's like, oh, do you need to make any extra money? I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, I can give you, like $200. There's this older guy in Palm Beach. He gets a lot of massages from girls. That was really, that's all she told me. He asked me to take my shirt off, so I took my shirt off, and that's how that was it.
Did you ever take your panties off and be completely nude?
Every now and then, yeah.
It's like a train. It's like I introduce them to all my friends, she'll bring her friends, and then she'll bring her friends. It goes on and on.
Having underage girls come to his house to abuse was like a constant need for him, which unfortunately drastically impacted the trajectory of these young girls' lives. One victim by the name of Carolyn, who was abused by Epstein starting in 2001, testified in court that she had become addicted to pain pills and cocaine in an effort to block out the abuse she endured at 14 years old. She claimed to have visited Epstein upwards of 100 times growing up, and that she was at his Palm Beach residence multiple times a week for years. Carolyn tragically passed away of a fentanyl and methadone overdose in October 2023. Although police were able to identify a little over 30 victims in 2015, Julie K. Brown later discovered through her own research around 80 girls abused by Epstein just in Palm Beach alone. And those are only the ones we know about. Considering the wealth and the powerful connections Epstein would use as leverage over his young victims, it's no surprise that these girls were reluctant to speak with anyone about what had happened to them. Some, like Michelle, didn't even tell her parents until the police came knocking at her door a year later. Even now, there are victims who understandably don't want their identities out there. One anonymous woman in particular outlined these feelings to ABC in 2019. I almost felt scared to talk. Like, was I going to get in trouble? Did I do something wrong that I could be arrested? I was young. I had blamed myself for all these years. I was definitely scared to talk. But that's not to say some girls hadn't been talking from the beginning.
Farmer says she reported the assault to the FBI, but she told us it wasn't for another decade, just before Epstein's first arrest in 2006. That an agent finally appeared at her door.
Remember Maria Farmer, who I mentioned earlier, how she told police that Epstein assaulted her in Ohio? Well, unfortunately, that wasn't a lone incident. That same year, her 16-year-old sister, Annie Farmer, was also abused by Epstein and his then-girlfriend Ghislaine at their New Mexico ranch, with Annie writing in her diary at the time of how weird it was that Epstein had rubbed her hand and lower leg at a movie theater, before later being instructed by Ghislaine Maxwell to give Epstein a foot massage, with Ghislaine later touching the 16-year-old inappropriately in front of Epstein. Epstein also got into bed with Annie at one point during the trip. Maria's experience in Ohio was similar, with the couple essentially trapping her in the house and groping her in unison, mirroring each other's movements, as the New York Times put it. Maria claimed in an affidavit that Les Wexner's security staff essentially kept her there against her wishes for 12 hours after the assault took place. It was at this point that Maria and Annie realized what had happened to one another and tried to take action. Both sisters reported their experiences first to police, then to FBI, who did nothing, prompting the sisters to instead speak with Vanity Fair journalist Vicky Ward on the record in 2002. Being tasked with writing the now infamous profile of the talented Mr. Epstein for the magazine, you would think that Ward would obviously publish the allegations and expose Epstein and Ghislaine once and for all. Only somehow that didn't happen. Sure, the article did briefly reference Epstein's affinity for, quote, mostly young girls, among a sea of other breathtaking quotes used to humanize the man, such as, quote, Epstein is charming, and, quote, many people comment there is something innocent, almost childlike about Jeffrey Epstein. Making sure to hammer home the generous $25 million donation he had just made to Harvard for the creation of a mathematical biology and evolutionary dynamics program in Epstein's name. The article made zero mention of the allegations Ward had been told by the Farmer sisters. Since the release of this article, the blame for this little blunder has been pointed at numerous parties. Ward blames Vanity Fair's then editor-in-chief, Graydon Carter, for succumbing to Epstein's intimidation tactics and not including the allegations out of a combined lack of sympathy for the victims and that he actually believed Epstein's story over theirs. While Carter has referred to Ward as a serial liar, Isaac Chotiner offered an extensive analysis of the claims made on both sides in his article last year for The New Yorker. I would highly recommend checking it out in full, along with Ward's two responses, to get the full story of what happened, but it ultimately boils down to a massive he said, she said. It's true that Carter does have a reputation of repressing stories in the past, and seems pretty biased toward Epstein, according to transcripts released by Ward, but it should also be noted that Ward herself went on to write two more controversial pieces on Epstein, one in 2011 that praises Ghislaine pretty heavily, and another in 2008 where she describes describes Epstein as, quote, perfectly charming, as he has been to me for years now, telling him over the phone, well, I guess you and I have a history by now, huh, Jeffrey? To which he responded, you know how many girls say that to me?
Damn, bro, you got the whole squad laughing. Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. Yeah, that's a good place to stop. Both because I have to get ready, but also because I need to for my sanity. It's okay, guys. We have a palate cleanser right here.